Hi everyone. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to hand tint certain parts of your photo using a brush and different blend modes. Alright, let's get started. So I've already showed you how to tint an entire photo with adjustment layers, but sometimes I might ask you just to change the color of one element of your photo, and that's where you could use this method. Okay, so to start with, I'm just going to create a new layer above my photo, and I'll do that by clicking on the new layer icon. And this is the layer that we're going to paint on and add tint to our photo. Okay, so I think I want to tint this foreground grass. I kind of want to make it look more autumn than summer. So what I'll do first is select my brush, and you can do that by coming to the brush icon here or using the shortcut B, and that'll open up your brush. So since I want to change it to a more orange color, I'll just go into my palette here and pick a color that I like. And then all you're going to do is paint where you want to tint. So if I want to tint this, I'm just going to paint over it. I'm going to make my brush bigger by using my bracket keys. And I'll make sure I have a soft brush selected, which I have right here. And then I'll just paint over this area here. And now we just take this layer and add a blend mode to it. And just choose one you like. I think the overlay looks good. It almost looks like evening lighting. We're getting a nice orange glow. If I want to tint my sky, now you could paint on the same layer with a different color, but I'm not sure if I want to use overlay yet for my sky, which I'm going to tint next. So I'm going to make a new layer for that, and then I'll paint over my sky and try out some blend layers. So maybe for my sky, I'm going to make it a nice red. I'll just paint over it. Doesn't matter if I go over the trees here. This can be rough. And then I'll just try some different blend modes. Overlay I think is looking really nice, and since I did spill over some of that color, we're getting a nice highlight over the trees. So I haven't showed you how to merge layers yet, and I'll do that now. Since both of these are using overlay, they can be on the same layer. So what I'm going to do is just hold Shift and select both of my layers. I'll right click on them, and then what I'm going to do is go to Merge Layers, and that's going to merge those two layers into a single layer. And since it merged them, it took the blend mode off that we had on, which was overlay, so we can just go back in and put that back on. Okay, I think I'll add some more color to the middle here, and I'll just paint on this same layer. Let's go with a nice deep orange and add some color to the lake here. So I'm just going to brush it in. And if I switch this off from overlay, I can see exactly where I'm brushing. So I just want to fill all these in. And then I'll switch it back to overlay. And now everything's tinted. I can go in and just keep on brushing over it if I wanted to with different colors. And just keep on adding tint. I'm just going to undo that. And we can also paint with a lower opacity so we're not making such a drastic change. So to do that, I'll switch it to red. And then I can change my opacity right in here with this slider, or I can use the number keys on my keyboard. So if I hit 5, that's going to correspond with the opacity here and change it to 50. 3 will change it to 30, 8 to 80, and so on. So I'm just going to turn this way down and then softly paint in some color. And even though I have it on a pretty harsh red, since I have the opacity so low, it's just nice and softly painting that in. We can also change the opacity of the overall layer up here and lower that. We can turn it right off. We can put it at about 50% or turn it all the way on. Something like that looks kind of cool. And then we can just toggle it on and off to see the change we made. So that's how you can hand tint photos with the brush and different blend modes. One thing I haven't showed you how to make yet, and I might ask you to include one in your project, is a vignette. And a vignette is a nice soft border around it that just helps to blend it and kind of focus your eye more to the middle. So the way I like to make a vignette is create a new layer, and then I'm going to fill it with black. I'm going to switch over to my paint bucket. I'll fill that layer, And then what I'm going to do is get my elliptical marquee tool right here and make an ellipse. And then what I'm going to do with my layer selected is hit the mask icon. And then I want to invert it. Now we have this nice elliptical frame around our image. What we want to do next is feather it, and we can do that up in the mask settings here. And again, if you don't have these settings open, go to Window and Properties. So I'm just going to turn up the feathering on this, and you want to feather it quite a bit. You don't really want to notice it, you just want a nice gradual fade. Once we get the feathering to where we like it, then I'm just going to drop down the opacity a bit. Maybe something around there. You want to keep them pretty subtle. So that just adds a nice soft frame around it and helps focus your eye more to the middle here. So you could use this as a way to tint black and white photos as well, and you can colorize those old vintage photos. I also like to use it for quickly coloring drawings that I do, and I'll show you how I do that. So here I have a sketch that I did on paper with pen, and I just took a picture of it and brought it into Photoshop. So I could try to mask out this black and separate it from the paper, then I could draw below it, or I could just paint over it and use a blend mode to quickly color it. So I'm going to make a new layer. Again, I'll switch this to multiply, and I like multiply for coloring drawings because it's going to leave the black alone and just paint everything else. So this lets me keep my black outline that I made. Okay, so with my brush selected and my color, I could just paint over it. And even though it's a layer above it, it looks like we're painting below the black lines. So you can just go through and color everything. If you mess up in places like this, you just take your eraser. I use the E shortcut to get it. You can find it right here. And I'll make it a little smaller, and you can just come in and erase parts. And here's a finished one that I have just so you can get the idea. So this is a nice, easy way to add some color to your sketches really quickly. And that's going to do it for this tutorial for hand tinting photos in Photoshop.